Jacob's blessing. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here on the Aliyah this morning. We have a lot to share. I have a lot to share anyway about the concept of Jacob's blessing in this Aliyah that we're looking at in our parsha Vayechi today. Jacob is beginning to bless his sons before he goes on to the Olam Haba. And so obviously there are specific blessings related to each of the tribes, and we'll do our best to look at as many of those, hopefully all of them. Maybe a little bit ambitious, but looking at as many of them as possible. This morning, however, I want to look at really just the overall general situation of what's going on here with respect to Jacob's sons, Jacob's blessing, kind of the meaning of the blessing in general, what he was initially thinking that he was going to convey to them, and what Hashem did to interrupt that. And so that's where we're going to go today. And there's a lot to talk about with that. So I want to jump right to it. So be sure and like this video. Thank you so much, by the way, for all of you who watch these videos. You know, we have, I don't know what the average is. I haven't really paid attention or calculated, I should say, specifically. But I would have to say that as far as live viewers every morning, we have, upwards of 50 plus, sometimes more. Sometimes slightly less, but it's around about 50. So thank you so much. And thank you so much for all of you who are dedicated here to being able to be here. Many of you would love to watch live, but you're not able to for all kinds of reasons. And so you watch later. And so thank you for that as well. Please be sure and, like this video. And my mother is on. So good morning, Mom. I was going to call you later and see how you're doing. Mom has been a little under the weather, so maybe God's will that she has a refuah shlema, complete healing, b'shem Yeshua. So, amen. So, hey, listen, I'm a little down today. I don't like to talk about life drama and our personal life. It's not really my thing, because I just don't like that. But our little dog Abigail is not doing well. So she's almost 17. She's always looked like a little puppy. And so, anyway, all right. So, sorry, man. Wow. All right. So I'm sorry. My apologies. I want to get to this insight. I want to talk this morning about, I've talked about Hebrew roots before. Excuse me. And I want to talk about the Hebrew roots movement because there's an insight here with respect to Ephraim, and I want to share that with you. But I want to do so in a non-emotional kind of way, as I'm getting emotional over my little dog, Abigail. But I want to do this in more of a Mr. Spock kind of way, because this insight I'm about to read to you is very powerful. But I wanted to preface it by kind of talking just a little bit about the Hebrew roots movement and the Hebrew roots people. But I don't want to be offensive, and unfortunately, sometimes when you speak truth, it's inherently offensive. And I don't know a good way around that. If I've been speaking publicly now for a few decades, and it just is what it is. So for all of you and any of you that are presently see yourself in the Hebrew roots movement, I want you to know that I want you, in the sense that I want to bring you into Lapid Judaism. I am very much, just to be straightforward and up front with you, I am absolutely opposed to the Hebrew roots movement. It is a mess, to be sure. It is fundamentally flawed at its base concept, which is what I'm going to be talking about here. It has no validity whatsoever. But those of you who are in it because you love Torah, and because you love God, because you believe in the Mashiach, and you want very much to follow the will of God. And so I want to help you. I want to bring you from that mess and into truth. Okay. So, what is the root problem of uh, Hebrew roots, really? I mean, Hebrew roots, by the way, is extraordinarily anti-Semitic, even more, if it were possible, even more so than Christianity. I'm talking about now. Listen, I'm talking about core beliefs, core root problems, right? And every time I say stuff like this, people are like, "I'm not anti-Semitic," and I get it because sometimes we don't think we are, but we are. But that's okay. We're going to push that aside for a second. I'm just going to speak in general terms. Remember, I'm like Mr. Spock. I'm just being non-emotional and being, logical here and just simply straightforward. So it's extremely anti-Semitic, even more than the church. It has the same root problem as Christianity, which is that it is 100,000% Paulinian based. That's the problem. And so let me just try to, there's a lot I want to say, but let me just try to articulate it as concisely as I can as it relates to what I'm about to read with respect to this wonderful insight. And it has to do with Ephraim. I'm sorry, my train of thought is a little messed up this morning because of the whole situation I mentioned about Abigail. Doesn't anyway, I don't want to talk anymore about that because I'm obviously it hurts my feelings. So I'm a little disjointed. But what I'm trying to say is that we've talked a lot this week about Ephraim and in a negative sense, the spirit of Ephraim. A lot of people out there that are not Jewish, they're Gentiles. And by the way, no Jews belong to the Hebrew roots movement because it's completely Gentile derived. And that's important, okay? In that mindset comes from Rome, okay, not from Jerusalem. Certainly not from Israel. But anyway, it's not proper. But the point is that you don't, if you're a Gentile out there and you think you're Ephraim, please stop. You're not. You don't want to be. Now I'm going to kind of flip the coin a little bit, and I'm going to talk about something positive from the insides as it relates to Ephraim. But you're still not Ephraim. Okay, you're not part of the lost tribes and all that. But there is a little correlation there that might make you feel that way. And hopefully I'm going to do a good job of explaining it here in just a minute as I'm trying to set this up properly. Okay. So let's get down to the root, the real root, as I mentioned about Hebrew roots, no pun intended. And that is that what's the problem with Hebrew roots? So basically with Hebrew roots movement, you have Gentiles who want to embrace a Torah lifestyle, and they love God, they love the Messiah, and they understand the fallacies of traditional Christianity and so on and so forth. They reject the pagan festivals, and also all of that is a positive, but they don't want to be Jewish. They want to remain Gentile, and they want to reinvent the Torah observance. They want to say to Judaism, "You're pretty much wrong, 100%." And it's a mixed bag because on one sense they'll say you Jews are not properly interpreting the Torah. You follow the traditions of men, and then you'll see that very same Hebrew rooter, if it's a woman, let's say, you'll see her wearing a tekel, right? And so you see this kind of contradictory type of stuff, and it's a mixed bag. It's a mess, is what it is. It's straight up confusion. There's different calendars. Sometimes in one Hebrew roots group, there could be like 5 different calendars within the group. It's just crazy. Okay. Even worse, Hebrew roots tend to be very anti-Semitic. Jews not only are following traditions of men, but those traditions of men are often, in their opinion, of course, it's not based on any truth or fact, but they'll say, everything we do is basically pagan. The Star of David is pagan. It's the Star of Ephraim. It's crazy, lunatic, insane stuff. Okay, but what's the root of it? Okay, aside from the demon, aside from the devil, but what's the real root? And the answer is that it's Paul. That's the root, Paul. So what happens is that the reason the Hebrew roots movement really even exists is because of Paul. Well, Rabbi, I thought you said that Paul did not teach Torah. He didn't. But people who come into Torah, they can't imagine that the apostle, kind of co-messiah, not really, but yes, is a heretic. So you got to reinvent Paul. I wrote an article about this called "Let Paul Go" on the RabbiGriffin.blog blog. But basically what it amounts to, I guess what I'm trying to say, and maybe I'm not doing a good job. I don't feel like I'm doing a good job this morning articulating it. But I think what I'm trying to say is that it's because you're looking at Torah observance through the prism of Paul. And through that prism, you believe there's some type of virtue or responsibility or cosmic need for you to not be Jewish. It's still Paulinian. Right? I don't have to convert to Judaism in order to be Jewish. Therefore, I'm going to be a Hebrew roots Gentile. But there's all this conflict because as you read the scripture, none of it makes sense. You can't. It's like Paul is a triangular peg, and you've got a round hole, and you're trying to hammer his rear end into that, and it's not working that well. So you make up this big fanciful nonsense about how you're actually one of the lost 10 tribes, a part of Israel, but you're not Jewish. You're Israel, but you're not Jewish. It's just crazy. Okay. And I want to help you because I want to stop the madness. And so basically, if you're a Gentile and you love this, then we love you for loving this. And we want you to become a Jew like you're supposed to. And stop trying to take a triangular peg and cram it in. Let Paul go. All right. That's the root problem. Somebody asked a question on the channel. And let me just address this really quickly because I wanted to do that. I think it's better to do it here than try to type it out. And I don't know. Anyway, this is what it says. It says, what are you struggling with? The person asks, and I don't think this person is being negative or mean. They're asking, right? What are you struggling with regarding Paul? I may not completely agree, but I'm seeing your points. I appreciate your heart. Still, may I offer one thought, and that is that Paul is not the enemy. And it goes on to say that, people will find the truth and so on. My response to that, and I think it's important. My response is, what are you struggling with regarding Paul? My answer, nothing. I don't struggle with Paul at all. Paul's a heretic. His writings are garbage. His gospel is fantasy. Did he have an encounter with the risen Messiah? No. How do I know that? Because what he wrote that the Messiah told him to say is not biblical. So I don't struggle with Paul at all. It reminds me of a joke. This little lady gets pulled over by a police officer, and he says, "Do you have any weapons in the car, ma'am?" And she says, "Yes, I do." And she opens a glove box, and there's a .357 Magnum in there. He's like, "Okay." She opens the center console, and there's a .45 automatic in there. He's like, "Okay." She said, "Look in the back seat." Laying in the back seat is a sawed-off shotgun. He's like, "Okay." She gets out and says, "Let me show you something in the trunk." She lifts up the trunk, and inside the trunk's an AR-15. And the police officer says, "Man, this is a lot of firepower for a little lady. What are you afraid of?" And she looks at him and she says, "Not one thing." So you see, I don't struggle with Paul. This person says Paul is not the enemy. I would beg to differ. He absolutely is the enemy. His teachings certainly are. As I said before, there's only one reason why people don't live a Jewish life. There's only one reason why the Hebrew roots movement exists. And I'm not bashing on the Hebrew roots movement this morning. I'm just trying to speak plainly. There's a lot of potential there. There's a lot of wonderful people. There's a lot of young families in the Hebrew roots movement that I would love to have in Lapid Judaism. But there's only one reason the whole stupid movement, pardon me, exists, and that is Paul. So no, do I struggle with Paul? No, he's a heretic. I don't struggle with him at all. I don't struggle to try to understand him. He doesn't confuse me. I don't think he's some Torah genius that I'm having to try to understand. He's a moron. And he's a heretic. And what he says is foolish and stupid. Anybody who actually knows Torah and actually knows rabbinic Judaism thinks this. This is why all Orthodox rabbis hate Paul, or not, hate's probably the wrong word. They look at him and understand he's a heretic. Why? Because they know what they're talking about. The only people who love Paul are not Jewish. Think about it. All right. That may have sounded like a rant. Maybe it was. I am a little bit emotionally off today. And again, I'm sorry. Just pray for us. It's tough when you have one of your little pets that you've had for so long and it doesn't look like it's going to work out. So, all right. So let me look. I said all that big old long intro. Hopefully, it's helping people. I sure hope so. I want everything that I say here, even if it hurts, even if it makes you a little mad, I want it to be redemptive. So the reason I brought all that up with respect to Jacob's blessing is because when Jacob is blessing his sons, and in this case, he's talking about Ephraim and Manasseh, this insight is related to that. Okay. So it says the name Ephraim, particularly among the prophets, is a collective name for the northern kingdom made up of the 10 tribes who were lost when they subsequently were scattered among the nations. Ephraim is mixed with the nations, Hosea 7:8. There's a typo here that is in this print. So was it this world's wide dispersion which the patriarch had in mind when he uttered the phrase, his offspring will become a fame among the nations? Some commentators think so. So it goes on to say here, true, the punishment of dispersion was due to the unfaithfulness and sinfulness of Ephraim's descendants. Remember, Ephraim's tribe, unfortunately, became very seditious, very rebellious, very, very idolatrous. It's not good to say, I am Ephraim, because basically you're identifying yourself with all of those negative traits, and it's not good. But there's a positive side to Ephraim, and so we're going to be looking at that as well. So it says, yet upon their ancestor, Jacob does confer his blessing, for they will return to God and will have their share in the world to come. This is Sanhedrin 110b. And Rabbi Eliezer adds, even the darkness in which the 10 tribes were lost will one day become as radiant as the day, according to Avos de Rabbi Nosson 36. And in retrospect, we do not see, in retrospect, do we not see that these children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, scattered among the nations, did indeed enlighten them? So the sages are bringing down that the positive effect of the northern kingdoms, the 10 tribes being scattered among the nations, is that they began to, at the very least, scatter the seeds of what would become holy sparks. Okay. So to provide a little bit of defense for the Hebrew roots people out there, the Hebrew roots Gentile, who says, I think I might be one of the 10 tribes. Of course you're not, naturally. But you may feel that way because the 10 tribes, if you will, have positively affected you to come to know the God of the Jews. And that's great. What has happened is you're a holy spark. So no, you're not part of Ephraim. You're not part of Manasseh, but you are a holy spark that God wants to bring into the tribes. But you're not destined to be a Gentile for the rest of your life, fulfilling some type of quacky and completely unbiblical Paulinian ideal. Okay? So what I'm trying to tell you is we want you to convert to Judaism. Yes, we do. You're supposed to. But this anti-Semitic Paulinian garbage is preventing you from doing it. You've got Romans in your head and Galatians in your head and Ephesians in your head. And that's why I fight this Goliath. Because I struggle with Paul? No. Because you struggle with Paul, and that's why I'm kicking his tail to set you free. That's the point. Okay? But I get it. It might sound like I have a hang up, and I totally can understand that. Because if you don't know me, you might think that, and I that's fine. So I'm making it clear, okay, or trying to, and I have no problem with the question. I'm not offended by the question. I'm not bothered by the question. I just simply want to answer the question. That's it. I'm not bothered by questions, y'all. I actually like them a lot because it gives me the opportunity to explain. So it says here. And by the way, can I just say this too? We live in a society that struggles a lot with self-esteem issues. Low self-esteem, as Rabbi Twersky of blessed memory has said, is one of the. He's a psychiatrist. He was a rabbi and a psychiatrist, and anyway, he passed away he was 80 some years old. But he said that in his medical practice, he saw that self-esteem was a root cause of a great many psychological problems. Please don't, when you're dealing with people, and myself included, and you see that they're very confident in whatever they're saying, in this case, teaching, please don't mistake that for arrogance. We live in a society where you're made to feel guilty if you're confident. I want my doctor to be confident, right? When I walk in there, I want him to tell me without a doubt, hey, we got this. I'm going to be able to take care of this. I'll be able to do that surgery. I got this. Listen, I've done, my father had a very, very intense open heart surgery. I mean, I don't even get into it right now, but I was like, oh my goodness. And I asked the doctor straight up, the surgeon, I said, have you done this before? And he looked at me with all the confidence in the world and said, I've done literally 5,000 of these. I got this. And I didn't walk away out of that office going, what an arrogant dude that was. Wow, I've done 5,000 of these. Did I do that? No, I was like, yes, thank you. Don't confuse confidence with arrogance, okay? And that goes for you too. It's okay for you to be confident in whatever you're great at. It's going to make some people uncomfortable because they struggle. They don't feel confident in anything. But anyway, that's all. That's your psychological help right there. So it says they did so by. So how did the 10 tribes enlighten people? It says they did so by bringing them the fundamental ideas of the knowledge of the love of God and of their forefathers, ideas which they had never forsaken. So even though they were wicked at their base level, they still had faith in the God of Israel. So it says, hence they too have a messianic vocation. The messianic vocation of the 10 tribes is to bring the knowledge of Mashiach ben Yosef, that is the suffering Messiah of Yosef, to the nations of the world. So in other words, so all of you Gentiles out there who are coming to a knowledge of Torah, coming to a knowledge of Judaism, and you've come to that knowledge precisely because of Yeshua, who is and was the Messiah, the suffering Messiah. And the only reason you have confusion in your life is because of Paul. But listen, what I'm trying to tell you is the reason you feel the way you do is precisely what the rabbis have said. The rabbis. Did I say the rabbis? Do you realize I'm reading to you from the oral tradition? Did you pick up on that? So the rabbis have said, hey, Ephraim, along with the suffering Messiah, is going to go into the nations and draw out the holy sparks. That's why you're here. The only reason you haven't crossed over and become a Lapid Jew through formal conversion is because of Paul. It's like the ram caught in the thicket. You're almost to the altar, but the Satan has wrapped his thorns around your head. But that's okay, because here comes Abraham to rescue you from the thicket. Okay? So that you can fulfill your purpose. So it says here, and he was the Messiah ben Yosef is also called in the Targum of Yonatan, Mashiach ben Ephraim. Why? Because Ephraim and Yosef are essentially the same thing. And he, it says here, will be a redeemer of humanity as a precursor of the Messiah, son of David. Okay, so this is the insight I want to bring to you. And with that, I want to share also from the Kehot Tumash, who says here that in granting this blessing, Jacob focused on the purpose of our descent into exile, which is not mere survival, but spiritual growth that results from our successful encounter with the exile. Likewise, in our exile, although just like Manasseh is the firstborn securing our Jewish identity, that's the first step. We have to be secure. We as Jews have to secure our Jewish identity in exile, and we've done so. Jews have lived in exile for nearly 2,000 years, and we have not lost our Jewish identity. And trust me, Christianity, and frankly, Hebrew roots, to be quite frank, has worked hard to make Jews stop being Jewish. But we've held strong. However, that's great that we've held strong, but that's only 50% of our mission. It says our main purpose, and I love the way the Kehot Tumash writes this. So half of our mission is just to maintain our Jewish identity, which, as I've said, we've done a great job at doing. But that's not the main mission. The other 50% of the mission, which is the main mission, is to positively influence the world around us. We are supposed to influence the world, not allow the world to influence us. That is what the insight is sharing with us. So that's part of the blessings of Yaakov that he shares with his sons. Now, the other part of the blessing is, or the insight regarding this blessing, is that Jacob initially he desired. It says here, talking, the Kehot Tumash brings down that Jacob he foresaw the final redemption. And he saw that it would occur thousands of years in the future. It would be delayed by the misdeeds of the intervening generations. Now, he thought, it says here, that if he would tell his sons about this, it would encourage them to urge their progeny to refrain from misbehavior and argument and augment their performance of good and positive mitzvot or deeds in order to hasten the redemption. So there's an idea in Judaism that by us keeping Torah, we hasten the redemption. Indeed, that is a fundamental idea, which is one of the reasons as Lapid Judaism, our target audience, if you will, is Gentiles. Are we out here trying to get Jews to believe in Yeshua? Not necessarily. At the very least, that's not our primary focus. Maybe it's not even maybe it's less than 20% of our focus. Probably, who knows what the number is? But our main focus is bringing non-Jews into a Yeshua-centered Judaism. What is the reason for that? Well, the main reason is because that's the life of the Messiah. So if you want to live like the Messiah, welcome home. Okay? But another side issue is that the more people that we get to start keeping the mitzvot who aren't presently doing it, the faster the redemption will come. And that's an idea in Judaism, as I've just said. Okay? So hence our effort. But what happened is that Jacob was about to reveal all of this to the brothers, the sons, but the Ruach HaKodesh lifted off of him because God did not want him to do that. And the main reason for this is because God, in his cosmic way, wants us to be people who have bitachon, who trust. Okay. Now, I've been doing a lot more just looking at, just contemplating last week during the Drosh, I taught on the just shall live by faith. And I made an effort to correct that understanding. And I've went back to review that because there was a key part of that I didn't get a chance to talk about on Shabbat, which I'll probably come back and talk about this Shabbat, kind of a part 2 kind of, because there's a key aspect. It has to do with the idea that the Paulinian all Paulinian ideas are false, but anyway, the Paulinian idea that we have to keep the law perfectly. If you don't keep it perfectly, then you're damned to hell for all eternity. We're gonna address that. But what's interesting about because it does revolve around the idea that just shall live by faith. What's interesting about, I went back and just reread Habakkuk again. And it's so fascinating because Paul, I know I'm sorry to have to mention him yet again. My apologies, but he loved to take verses completely out of context, reinterpret them, and make them a pretext for his false theology. He did that so, frankly, masterfully with Habakkuk. It's a complete lie, but listen, lots of liars are masters. Okay, so anyway, but when you actually read Habakkuk and you understand what Habakkuk is saying there in chapter 2 and verse 4, when he says, the righteous one shall live by faith, in context, what he's saying is that even though you don't yet see the redemption and it looks like the world is going to hell in a handbasket around you, the righteous man still will trust in God that eventually this redemption will come. And you know who actually says that? In Habakkuk chapter 2, Habakkuk is quoting God. God is saying the new prophecy, that is the prophecy of redemption, will surely come, and the righteous one will continue to have faith in me that it will come. That's the context. Has nothing to do with salvation whatsoever. It's an idea that even though we're in exile and we're going through the trials of life, the righteous one still hopes in God. So in other words, I mentioned my little dog, and it made me really sad. Almost started to cry, obviously. But losing a pet in the grand scheme of things is a small thing. Many people go through obviously much greater tragedies, and we certainly have as well in our life. Still, it's sad. But the point, in fact, is that you can go through something like this, which is sad, very sad. But the righteous one will live by faith, will continue to trust and say, this must be God's will. In other words, this sad situation, whether it's a pet or something much worse, there must be a gamzu letova here. There must be a this too is for the best. That's what Habakkuk is trying to say. And that's the power of Jacob's blessing. Jacob's blessing is, and this is what the insights bring down. Before he even gets into blessing the tribes, there's a long insight. I don't have time to go over the whole thing because it's many pages long. But the insight brings down that what Jacob is initially imparting into his sons is this idea of bitachon. This idea that though the Mashiach tarry, surely I will wait for him. Though I don't understand why they're suffering in the world, I still trust God. That's what Habakkuk was trying to say. Even though Nebuchadnezzar is coming down and he's going to cause great pain, just trust that the redemption from Nebuchadnezzar will occur. Which, by the way, that whole event, by the way, dispels the idea of you got to live perfectly or God is going to hate your guts. Why? Because, well, we didn't live perfectly and Nebuchadnezzar came and took us into Babylon. But guess what happened? 70 years later, we were redeemed from Babylon. Wait, what? I thought that if you don't live perfectly, he's off with your head. Apparently not. So it says here, the doctrine of Judaism conceives this metaphysical element in a more direct and more personal way. Where man sees only the effect of blind chance, Judaism recognizes the action of providential intervention. So, in other words, to the Jew, everything is at the hand of Hashem. So it says, it manifests itself as an immaterial factor independent of human will coming from a supernatural sphere. It is woven or interwoven into the fabric of our economic, social, scientific, or cultural activities, bringing its determining influence to bear. The factor is the heavenly blessing which brings the element of success, achievement, and prosperity to man's effort. It develops and brings its enterprise to fruition. So there's no luck, there's no chance, there's no fate. It's just God. And as the Jew recognizes that even those things that seemingly are natural consequences, they're still of God. Take medicine for an example. The Jew recognizes that does this medication, whatever it is, for whatever it is, does this medication have this effect? The answer is yes, if God wills it. Why? Because the medication can only have its effect if God commands it to have the effect. The oil will only burn if God commands it to burn. You say, no, the oil burns. True. That's because God commanded it to burn. But the point, in fact, is that to the Jew, God is the master of all things, not some things, all things. So it says, so I'll conclude with this. So the Shekinah withdrew from him, and he was unable to reveal what he wanted to reveal about the coming redemption, right? And if you'll notice, Jewish people don't generally spend much time, if any time, on trying to calculate the redemption. We might say the redemption is nigh, and we can hear the footsteps of Messiah, but you won't see prophetic conferences by Jewish rabbis ushering tens of thousands of people into auditoriums to tell them that the Messiah is going to return next Tuesday around lunchtime, and so might as well go ahead and be prepared. But in Christianity and other instances, man, that is a pastime. People have written books upon it. They've made millions. They've all been wrong, of course, naturally. But it's a big deal. Why? Because to the Jew, what I'm about to read here, we don't really need to know. Because we're comfortable in our own skin. I mean, do we want Mashiach to come? Yeah, today. Now we don't have to go through hard times with friends and family passing away or other tragedies or little pets dying. We would rather have Mashiach now. But we're comfortable living for God. The problem with the Gentile is they're not. And anyway, but this is what it says. It says the Jews have no need of knowing the direction of their duration, of their suffering, as long as they are supported by Shema Yisrael, which is a euphemism for the mitzvot. Their proclamation of absolute faith in their historic mission in the word Shema Yisrael, containing the manifesto of monotheism, ought to suffice to give them courage, enthusiasm, perseverance until the end of time. It is to fill up their soul to such a point that the will to achieve the messianic goal for which they live puts any anticipation of early redemption in the background. The adore of faith ought to be more powerful a reason for loyalty to God than hope of salvation. See, the Gentile is driven by, what do you have to do to be saved? The Jew is driven by, what do I have to do to be in a intimate relationship with Hashem? Salvation is a byproduct of that. If I have an intimate relationship with Hashem and if I'm pursuing him every day of my life, you don't think he's going to save me? Of course he is. But that's not what the Gentile is only concerned with, what happens when I die? The Jew is concerned about, what do I do while I live? For the one who has faith, what does it matter to know when his trials will come to an end? Exactly. It's like we tell people, well, when will the Messiah come? I don't know. I'm just gonna be constantly ready. So when it happens, I won't have to worry about it. But you might be trying to find out the end times, only to find out when he comes, there's no oil in your lamp. End of our Aliyah today. Thank you so much for being here with us. Please pray for Rebbetzin and I, because I don't know what the next couple of days, it doesn't look good. So thank you for that. Like I said, I don't like to bring our drama into your life, because we all have drama. Not that drama is necessarily negative, but life is life. That's what I'm trying to say. But we're family here, so thank you so much. God love all of you. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Bezrat Hashem. Have a great and amazing day.